Hello, and welcome to the webinar. I just wanted to kind of introduce you guys to Fuzor. Fuzor basically is when we brought Fuzor into existence, the idea was to be something where architects or designers could see their projects happen in real time, be able to see those changes that they make update immediately without having to wait for it, or go through a lot of the cumbersome processes that they would have to do to be able to navigate their file. And as that moved along, what it did is it became something that became its own sort of a productivity tool. And recently we've started instating construction and 4D animation otherwise into there, which branched off into Fuzor VDC. So what I'm going to be showing you today is primarily focused around the virtual design construction side of it. So on the left-hand side of the screen, what you'll actually see over there is it's actually a project file that was gifted to us by one of our clients. What it is actually multiple Revit files that are actually linked together in there. Now we can bring in Revit files, ArchiCAD, SolidWorks, Rhino. We can drag and drop SketchUp, FBX, 3ds, PTS Point Cloud, or even DWGs that are native to your authoring software file. The idea was that we could bring several different formats together. That you really wouldn't normally be able to see together in the same place at the same time. And it gives you kind of that advanced productivity that gives you that extra step forward to be an industry leader. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm deciding which one of these linked files I actually want to bring in. In this case, I'm going to bring in everything that's in here, including a specific linked VG that's coming out of Revit. Now when I load that, what it's going to do is Revit's going to think about it for a second there. It's going to start chewing on the properties, and it's going to start sending it over to the Fuzor side. So just to kind of give you a little depth on this, this particular project, what it is, it's a site file. It's got 3 different buildings on there. Inside one of those buildings is actually nested the structural file. And we're able to take all of that information and bring it into Fuzor. So right now Revit's going to chew on that, and Revit likes to chew, so give it a second. And then once that's done, you'll actually start to see it develop on the Fuzor side. So give that just a little bit. Revit likes to kind of eat this particular file for a couple of seconds here. And then while it's setting up, I'm going to go ahead and make sure my settings are all right. There we go. All right, one last file to go. Come on, Revit, you can do it. All right, so now what you're actually seeing is it's going to actually start to load up on the Fuzor side. Now, the nice thing about that is I do have full navigation while it's loading, so I'm going to switch over to free camera, and I'll be able to move around and look at my project as it's loading. Now, one of the things that we definitely believe in bringing into anything that's a visualization file is accuracy. So we bring in all the geometry as well as any kind of project metadata you have. We bring it in as is so you don't lose anything. We don't force you to optimize. If you've done a lot of material work or otherwise on one side, we'll be able to bring that in as well. So, but one of the nice things about it is, let's say if I select a specific object on the Fuzor side of it, I can see the full list of element properties that are in there. I'll be able to sort and look through those, whether it's something that goes into a specific phase. If I want to be able to do my phase and visibility filtering, I can do that. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll actually see it loading it up. That's actually kind of showing you your progress. As it's loading up, you actually see it kind of come up twice. What it'll do the first time is, like I said, it's bringing in all your geometry, all your project data, and the second time, what it's doing is it's synchronizing your Revit file that you opened into Fuzor. What that does, it gives you the power to make changes going back and forth. And so, we were kind of we kind of originated the idea of bringing the changes directly from your authoring software into a visualizer about 3-4 years ago. But one thing that we kind of still hold to that we know that nobody else has actually managed to touch is the ability to take those changes and send them back the other direction. So here we go. Let me just switch over to my meta rendering mode, and Lord knows why this always likes to throw me into the bathroom, but there I am. So I'm just going to hit my adjustments here, kind of show you what the full look is. So right now, everything is inside of Fuzor. It's fully navigable. This is actually all my project files that have been brought in there. I'm going to maximize the screen to give you a better view. And so just to kind of give you an idea of the scope of this entire project, this is kind of the this is the overview. I've got my parking structure on one side. I've got one building over here. I've got another one over here. And right now, it's fully navigable. If I decide, you're seeing free camera. If I decide I want to drop my avatar somewhere, say for instance right here in the middle of my project, I can navigate that way too. Fuzor also gives you the ability to do things like material changes or any kind of object movement or otherwise. So let's say if I need to fix a specific material, like this should be asphalt, I can go over here, I can switch this to any of the existing materials in my project, or if I just need to borrow a material from another part of the project, I'm just going to go ahead and select it right there. I'm going to go ahead and hit switch material for all instances. And this is just kind of looking at the visualization and the beautification side of it. Now one of the things that we kind of push with Fuzor is, there's a lot of products out there that visualize, but what we do is we try to make visualization productive. So along with being able to navigate an avatar control, you can see this in terms of giving you a sense of space, in terms of, let's say if I want to switch that out to, say, a child's eye view, if I'm designing a theme park or a children's school or a playground. If I zoom all the way in, I can kind of see this from a first-person perspective and remember what it is to be 3 foot nothing. And as well, if you want to switch that out and sort of get a better feel for, say, ADA compliance, we do have the avatar wheelchair capabilities. Another thing we do is we recognize that if something's coming out of Revit or one of your authoring software, we recognize that it is a door and we try to automatically animate that. So I'm just right-clicking on the door and bringing that in. We also have the ability to do things like refit objects or otherwise. Now, one of the biggest benefits of Fuzor is that at any point, now that it's fully loaded into Fuzor, all I have to do is, if I happen to have my VR software set up, and I'm just going to warm up Steam VR here real quick. There we go. And what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and just warm up my hardware there. At any point, whenever I'm ready, I can go ahead and click the virtual reality button. And when I do that, what you'll actually see on the screen is what I'll be seeing inside of my VR headset view. So give me a second here. There we go. Looks like somebody had one of our towers unplugged, so I'm just going to let that one warm up really quickly. There we go. So now if I hit the virtual reality button, what you're actually seeing is my VR headset view. I'm going to go ahead and pop that on really quickly here. Now again, the idea behind Fuzor is to make VR and visualization a productive process. So give me a moment here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my controllers really quickly as soon as I can see them. There they are. Now what I'm actually looking at is it's VR, so I'm working with the HTC Vive. We also work with the Oculus Rift. But what I'll be able to do is move around my project, either walk around in a given space, or I can move myself to certain locations. Say if I want to drop myself in the middle of this room over here, it's a display area. This area here is actually a DWG file that was local. That was actually native to my Revit file. So I can kind of get a sense of a better space for that. If I want to find out more information in VR, I can hit the element properties button. I can click on any particular object and I can see what the information is on that, whether it's the wood flooring or this particular setup in here, or even if I want to click on the lighting, I have the ability to see what the different element properties are of that. Now if I don't want to navigate that particular way, I can also go to the mini-map here and actually select specific locations to jump to. So I zoom out here. Let's say if I want to drop myself back into that room I started with, I'm just going to point at the map and go over here. Now we have other things inside of VR. The question is, the biggest question is, what does this mean for VDC? Well, let's say if I'm doing something in terms of doing construction, review, or otherwise, I need to take a measurement, see what my clearance is. Say if I want to look at, what my clearance is from this particular structural member to the one over there. I can go ahead and point at it and just go ahead and snap a measurement. Let's go ahead and select perpendicular. And so I'm looking at about, let me step over here. So I'm looking at about a 34 foot 4 inch clearance between those two pillars. I want to make sure I have clearance for a piece of equipment below these panels above me. I can see what that is. If I need to do anything like in VR, if I need to kind of prototype rapidly and move something, in this case, I'm going to move a piece of furniture. This could be a piece of equipment or otherwise, so I can go ahead and grab, oops, go ahead and exit that, delete last. And I'm going to go to movement mode here. What I can do is I can grab, say, maybe this is a piece of equipment, I need to shift this over somewhere, and rotate that around, and set that into place somewhere else. I can rapidly prototype for space and move different things around. Now, if I have a particularly heavy file, I can also, a lot of times when you're looking at construction side of it, you're looking at a lot of different things, like say you've got the architectural in there with the MEP, with the structural, and sometimes that can make a file somewhat heavy. Now, we actually work with some pretty massive file sizes. I think the biggest file size I've ever had in here is about 4.7 gig file with about 187 million polygons, about 212,000 objects. It was actually an airport project. But what I can also do is I can switch it down to draft mode, which keeps things very simple, removes anything that would be the real-time lighting measurements that we do in here. And it just makes it a lot easier to navigate. It skyrockets the frame rate. And so I'm going to show you a couple more things in VR later, but really what I want to kind of get into right now is how this actually applies to virtual design construction. So I'm going to go ahead and set this down really quickly. Now let's say what I've got here is my construction level documents. What I want to do in this is, go ahead and change my render mode over here. What I want to do in this is actually plan out for, let's say if I want to do some scheduling and some 4D sequencing to see how my building is actually going to go up. With Fuzor, we actually allow you to bring in different files such as, I'm going to use the visibility overrides. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my landscape so it's not in the way. With Fuzor, what we allow you to do is bring in your different scheduling files. Say if you work in Primavera P6 or Microsoft Project. What we have here in the construction side of it is I can go ahead and load up one of those. And what I'm going to do really quickly is just kind of show you an example of a sample P6 project, or sample P6 schedule. What it'll do is it'll load up my my IDs, it'll load up all the predecessors, it'll auto-populate the task list and the Gantt chart. So if you take an XML out of P6 or out of project, you can quickly load that into Fuzor. With P6 files, we can actually make edits inside of here and send them back as well. Now, let's say if you don't have either of those and you still want to do your simulations for your 4D sequencing, what we can do is we can also create schedules from scratch inside of Fuzor, or we can use this to actually narrow down a specific field if you only want to view, from a certain date to a certain date for the construction sequence. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open up a schedule file that I specifically made for this project inside of Fuzor. Now, what it's going to ask me when I load that is if I want to merge that into my existing schedule. If, for instance, I don't want to make changes inside of Fuzor, what I do have the ability to do is keep making changes inside my scheduling software, bringing those into Fuzor and merging them back in. And it'll remember the unique IDs. It'll update all your durations without having to reassign different objects for different tasks. In this case, I'm going to tell it no, don't worry about merging it, and I'm not going to save this. And this is actually going to load up my sample schedule for this particular project. Now, just to kind of show you the ease of use in terms of quickly assigning things to a 4D sequence inside of Fuzor, if I want to, say if I have my schedule up here and my first task is pour foundation pilings and reinforcements, if I want to select something like, say, a double pile here, I can click on it, I can hit my add button at the bottom of the screen, or if I want, before that, if I want to say add all instances of that, I can do that. I can say add all type at current level, and that's just a really quick selection. Now, one thing you might notice is as I turn around, what it's doing is it's actually selecting some pilings from another building that I know, let's say that I know is an existing structure. If I want to get a lot more specific, I do have the ability to filter things inside of Fuzor very quickly. Fuzor can actually filter by any of your element properties that come in. So if I want to filter by family, symbol, level, otherwise I can do that. And to do that, all I really need to do is access either my construction filter manager up top, or I can access my filters directly from the task. So for instance, this one here, I can click on the filter icon. I can say only search through the Science Center structural drawings, only look for structural foundations, and I can hit highlight if I want to double verify. And so looking around, it looks like it's not grabbing anything that I don't want in there. To kind of show you what that looks like from point A to point B is, okay, I've got my schedule loaded. I'm going to click on that. Go ahead and say only look at the structural, only look at structural foundations, and I'm just going to hit add. So in about 15 to 20 seconds, I've got 128 objects added directly, no in-between steps, directly from my model into the task. And at the moment, they're already preset to animate in. So I can set my default coloration to be, something that's a little more visible. If I want that to be a little more realistic, by task, I can change my coloration so that if I want it to look more like concrete pulling in, I can do that. I can hit my play button to replay that, show it going in. And just to kind of show you how quick, that's kind of how quickly and easily we can add things in terms of just basic addition. Now let's say if I want to edit those animations, I want to fly them in instead of move them in. Not so much useful for concrete pours, but let's say instead this was a panel. I can always say edit the animation, tell it to move in. I can give it an initial move position. And I can do that individually for a single one, or what I can do is I can say apply to family. And now what happens is I back off, you'll see that those double piles are now actually moving in rather than growing in. So it makes the whole 4D process a lot easier to work with. Now to kind of show you the full power of that, that's just simple addition. Let's say if I go up here and let's take a look at my Science Center. Let's start turning things off. Fuzor has a full list of productivity capabilities in here that help you do different things like, say, isolate systems. So if I want to turn off my architectural model, run one, Science Center architectural model, I can turn that one off. If I click on an object, it'll help me locate it. So I can turn off my flooring and my walls. So now what I'm looking at is basically the base skeleton of my structure. Now let's say if I want to auto sort, what's becoming kind of a popular mode of in terms of workflow process is to take your objects and add a specific custom field in there. One of our clients actually does add a custom field that's a timestamp for all the objects as they put them in, so that what they'll have is in here, it'll say something like timestamp or underscore TS, and it'll give a value for that. What we have the ability inside of Fuzor to do is sort by any of these categories. Now what that can also mean is that I can auto sort by those categories. So for instance, let me just go ahead and add really quickly 3 new tasks in the middle of this. Now what I want to do is auto sort by those values. Since I don't have a custom field in here, I'm going to use symbol as my custom field. So let's say my value for this one, my symbol value is 16 by 31. I'm just going to go ahead and go here and say 16x31. And let's choose 2 more really quickly just to kind of show off what it can do. This one is going to be a 12 by 14. And one more. Let's go ahead and pick, there we go, it's an 18 by 40. Now let's say that's something that's applied across the board to all my different model pieces. What I can do is I can create a filter in here. I'm just going to relabel this as Auto 1. And I'm going to add a new rule here. I'm going to say go down to parameter, and I'm going to say filter by that field. So in this case, I'm using symbol as my custom field. And if that value is equal to my task name, what it's going to ask me to do, what it's going to let me do is now I have an apply to task button. What it's going to do right now is if I hit that button, it'll search through all the different tasks. And if those conditions are met, now what I'm looking at here is I've got my 21 16 by 31s loaded into this task. My 50 12 by 14s loaded into this task, and my 25 18 by 40s loaded into that task. So just show you how quickly and easily Fuzor can get very specific with your files. Another thing that we can do is when it comes to construction, a lot of times the classic method is let's go ahead and add everything from the first floor going up, now the second floor going up. Well, in the actual construction process, you're worried about the logistics, you're worried about getting your equipment in and out of certain areas. And so you're normally going to start building out by construction zone. Well, what we can do in Fuzor is if I turn this on here really quickly, let me go ahead and get myself in a position here. Oops, there we go. So what I can do with Fuzor is really quickly I can establish my own construction zones. So let's say if I go ahead and create a construction zone really quickly, say it's in this particular location, anything that falls inside that that area, let's call that Zone A, will be considered part of Zone A. If I want to create another one really quickly or overlap them, in this case I'm going to make this entire building one construction zone. I'm just going to call this P struct. So that's my parking structure zone. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. What that's done is it's actually created a new filter for me. So if I want to go, say, to my construction filter manager, let's go ahead and look at this particular one here. And I'm going to go ahead and say, let's create a new filter here. And I'm going to go ahead and add that, say, I want to look only at my structural columns. And I want to look only at the ones that fall into Zone A. If I highlight that, what you'll notice is actually selecting all the structural columns that fell inside of that specific construction zone. If I want to get more particular, I can add another one, say, okay, only the ones that fall in Zone A and are on level 1. So if I highlight that now, it'll be able to shrink those down. What that's really good for is adding things specifically to tasks as you want to build out from a certain area or from a certain area back. Or let's say we can also remove things quickly from tasks. So if you have something that's incorporating all of your columns, you can quickly say, in this area, I want these to pull out because I want them to be done later. What that's also very good for is if I want to add something called a staging task. Now what a staging task lets me do is I can pin out something over here that is going to be my staging area, or something where I can put a laydown area. And since that's currently in my construction filter manager, I can really quickly go to this filter here, select filter 4, and hit add. Now what you'll notice is it's actually gathered all those columns up into that area. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and change my row length up to, let's say, 15. And let's go ahead and change the orientation on that one a little bit. Let's go south by west. Now that I've got those there, I'm going to refit that really quickly. I'm going to rotate those in that specific area. And so what I've more or less done is I've created a stockpile section over here where if I want to be able to grab items from a certain area or place them in that area, I can do that. Where that comes into effect is Fuzor also gives you a full array of construction vehicles. So let's say if, for instance, I have one of my cranes come in, I have a mobile crane in here. What I can do is I can quickly animate that mobile crane to, say, if I go over here, say, add another keyframe, and it's just keyframe animating. So I'm adding one in here. Let's add another one over here. Let's hold shift and rotate them around a little bit. Add another one over here. Going to shift him into place. Now in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab his main arm, bring that up, and let's go ahead and rotate him around here while extending my boom. And let's go ahead and grab 2 extensions on that one. And then right now what I'm going to do is go ahead and drop my hook. So now I got my hook right about where I want it there. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to grab a specific object. Now our construction vehicles can actually grab specific objects in here. So if I pick something or if I hover over it with my object picker there, you'll see that it's actually telling me where that object's supposed to go. So let's say if I grab that one right there, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up just a little bit, and I'm going to update that one. If that's in the wrong orientation, I'm going to go ahead and move that over so it's correct. And I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more keyframes there really quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and add this one here and rotate him back around. So let's say if I've got that all set up, at that last frame what I want to do is let go of the object. It'll ask me where I want to drop it, whether it's the original or the stage location. If I want to demonstrate my long bed trucks coming in and dropping off my supplies, I can do that to kind of show off the logistics of how the site's going to operate, within an existing roadway. Or what I can do is I can tell it to drop it to its original location, in which case it'll drop it. I don't have to be perfectly accurate. It'll put it right back where it's supposed to be. Now once that's done, what I can do is I can go ahead and add that to, let's give it a duration, let's say 21 days. So what I'm going to do really quickly is back that up, just to kind of refresh this particular item here. What that shows right here, just to preview it, I can add him to a vehicle task later to time it out. But if I go through the full animation right now, not touching the mouse or the keyboard, it's just really quickly kind of showing that you can go in, grab, pick up an object, move over, and drop it into place. So you have the ability to be as simple or as detailed as you want inside of Fuzor to kind of show off the full range of of what your project can do. Now what I'm going to do right now, since you're kind of getting the basic gist of moving all of this in here, I'm going to show you a project that I actually did do a little more work on. Now one of the big benefits of Fuzor is it doesn't have to be connected to your authoring software in order to run. I can save out an individual Fuzor cache file. So if I want to open that later, or if I want to open it on another desktop with Fuzor that may not have the revit file, what I can do is I can open that up in here. So let's say if I've got this one set up. When we were putting this together, all in all, this probably took me 2.5 days to put together. And that's as I was learning it as we were building the features. But let's say if I start scrolling and scrubbing back through my timeline, you can kind of see how the full construction sequence goes back in there. What I'm going to do really quickly here is I'm just going to hit the play button, and I'm going to drop myself down to avatar control. Now while I'm at that, I'm going to go ahead and go over here and go to my settings. I'm going to slow down my simulation speed just a little bit here, actually just a lot. And I can walk around my project site as my simulation is going up. And so this will give me kind of a better feel for how my project is going to be going together, where my different tasks are going to be coming in, where my different systems will be kind of going in there. Right now it's hitting the concrete pour. I need to retime that a little bit, but currently we've got my concrete boom going, concrete truck sitting in there. Now, like I said earlier, at any point this can be pushed into VR, so Fuzor is 100% VR ready at any time. So again, what you're seeing right now is actually the view that's matching my VR headset. If I've got my controllers in operation here, what I can do is, let's say if I want to open up my 4D sequencing here, I can speed this up or slow it down. When I designed this, I come from a construction management background, so out of reflex I gave the concrete dry time, so bear with me. Let's say if I'm moving around here, looking at different things inside of my 4D schedule, and I'm actually seeing my building go up around me as it goes. So I've got different columns going in here. Should be another truck over here. I think that's in another version right now. But let's say if I'm looking at this from a VDC perspective, from say a safety management perspective, I've got all these different objects going in. And what I'm noticing is in this area here, this is potentially a fall hazard. So what I can do is in my project, I'm going to pause it really quickly here. In my project, what I can do is I can go down here to my equipments in VR, and I can actually select specific equipment in here. If I want to start, loading in fence lines, say privacy or a regular fence, I can really quickly kind of prototype this inside of VR. And so I can start laying down fence in here. Now what you're normally going to do is, for construction, obviously fence lines are going to get in the way and you want it to be temporary anyway. What happens if somebody goes and knocks it into that hole? So instead, oops, let me go and show you what this looks like from down here. Yep. So instead what I'm going to do in here is, let's go back to selection mode. Let's go ahead and get rid of these. And far enough. There we go. And they're gone. And that is the fun way to delete things. Instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my equipment, and I'm going to go to the top here, and let's say, I'm going to go grab this all the way up here. Let's say if I want to instead mark this off as a hazard zone, in this particular instance, let's go with red. And I'm going to say this is going to be a fall area. So if anybody's going to be near this, until it actually gets filled in or it gets covered up, this is going to be considered a hazard zone. You want to be able to tie off before you get anywhere close to that. Well, that's considered equipment, so what I can do is I can add those into an equipment task so that when that hole gets dug or when that's going to be going up, I can either tell my crews to put a fence line around that, or say that this is going to be a danger area. Make sure you tie off until it gets filled in, and then when the equipment task is done, I can get rid of those at the same time, and I can build that into my schedule. One of the other fun things we can do in here is we recently instated something called scale mode. So let's say if I want to drop this down to, say, a 1/25th scale really quickly here. So now I'm basically looking at this from an overhead view. I can do this one-handed if I want to. So if I want to rotate my 4D schedule around, I can do that. Or if I have two controllers in this particular instance, let's say if I want to rotate this direction, look around, watch that go up, I can do it. And then, of course, this does work in conjunction with my 4D. So if I go ahead and play that, now I'm basically looking at what looks like a miniature version of my 4D sequence. Oh, there you are. Just wondering where you went. And I can kind of see this from an overhead site logistics standpoint. Now let's say if I go ahead and move that up just a little bit here. Let's crank up the simulation speed. And I'm looking at this and I'm deciding, maybe right about here somewhere. They're starting to do the concrete pour. If I want to drop myself to a specific area, I can do that really quickly by using the same teleport feature. And then as this is going in, I can always crank my simulation speed down again and hit play. And so now I'm actually watching my concrete boom go up in very slow motion. Let's speed that up just a little bit here. There we go. And so now I can look at that particular aspect of my construction sequence, see where that's going in, make sure that logistically it works really well. If there's anything that I need to worry about in the process, clearances for the boom or otherwise, I can see that inside of a VR atmosphere, where it really gives me that extra sense of space. And again, at any point, if I want to check element properties on something, say for instance I've got this guy up here. Oops, switch that back to selection mode. So if I go, I'm looking at this one, so concrete floor, 3.5 inch over 3-inch W deck. So it looks like I've got an underlayment on that one. Rebar cover on the bottom, interior slab. So I'll get all my information here as I need it to go through. Now a lot of times the question is asked, what if we have changes to my project that happen to come up, mid-sequence? Say we send something out for the architect to fix, and they send us back a revised model. Well, if they happen to do that, what we can do is we can just drag and drop that we can create a cache file for Fuzor, drag and drop that new one into your existing file. And what it'll do is it'll give you a merge dialog box asking if you want to add the new changes in there, whether it's geometry changes or material changes. And it'll do that without having to dissociate any of your object assignments, which basically means your 4D remains intact. The only thing you might have to add in there is if they added something new that wasn't previously in there. So give me just 1 second here. There we go. So along with that, virtual design construction, this is kind of going through the 4D and the scheduling side of it. But a lot of times what you're also doing with construction is you're trying to look into things like, say, constructability review, clash management, making sure that all your systems are going to go in there, properly before you actually start trying to build. So what I'm going to do for that really quickly is I'm going to go ahead and open up a different file here. So let's say, for instance, if I open up, let's go ahead and open, let's go ahead and open one I've got back here. Oops, wrong one. Let's open this one. Here we go. Just want to make sure I open a clean file, just kind of give you guys a better idea of this. So this is another version of the same file that I kind of saved out there. It's got everything in it. Let's say if I want to do something like clash detection. Now, in terms of VDC, that's kind of a huge thing in there, especially if you're worried about different systems trying to be installed, worry about project delays due to having to wait for standard turnaround time for people to come back to you with different information, with resolutions to your conflicts. So with Fuzor, what we can do is we can really quickly run a simple clash detection that's also interactive. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's open up Revit really quickly here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit the Edit button on here. Give that a second. Now, if I click on an object and hit the Edit button, what that's going to do is it's going to try to reopen and relink the file that you actually used as a source for that. In this case, it's going to be the architectural file. And what it's going to do right now is it's going to go ahead and resynchronize with Revit. Now, since this is a single building, it's going to take a lot less time than we saw trying to bring up the entire project. Now, that's really useful for several reasons. What that's primarily good for is if you're continuously running off, say, a central model, or maybe somebody's continuously giving you revisions. If you resynchronize that, what that'll do is it'll bring in instantly those revisions. If you want to pick and choose for the merge, like I was talking about before, what you can do is you can put out the new version of the file and then drop it onto the other Fuzor cache file, and it'll give you a merge dialog. But in this case, what it'll do is if you're the one in control and you're just going by whatever the new revisions are, resynchronizing will make sure that you have whatever the latest updates happen to be from the file. So that's just about done resynchronizing. Give that another second to kind of finalize there. And since I am resynchronizing on that, what it's going to do is it's going to try to also automatically locate the most applicable 2D view that has that particular file in it. Now I'm in course mode right now, so you might not be able to see it, but this is actually highlighting in blue, which is that pipe. So to kind of show you, just kind of go step back a little bit and show you that Fuzor has those live link capabilities. What I can do is, let's say if I want to move something over here, say shift that pipe over, what that'll do is it'll automatically calculate it. You'll see that that change actually happen inside of Fuzor. Now let's say if instead I'm trying to visualize this in 3D, and from my Fuzor standpoint, let's say if I want to go ahead and move these pipes over, refit this one this direction, and refit this one back this way. What you might see in there is it looks like those pipes are disconnected. With Fuzor, what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here to the Fuzor side and say request sync back. What that's going to do is it's going to look for any changes that I've made inside of my 3D document. In this case, those two refits. And if I hit the view button, it'll locate them for me on my Revit drawing. But right now, what I'm going to do instead, so I'm going to say select all and say sync selected. What that's going to do is Revit's going to look at it. It's going to say, okay, I've moved those pipes. They should be in connection with the rest of these pipes, so I'll reconnect the pipes. Then what that's going to do is Fuzor's going to say, oh, you reconnected the pipes, so I'll reconnect the pipes too. What that means for VDC, especially in terms of clash detection, is what I can do is go over here to my validation and analysis tools. Let's say if I run my clash manager. In this particular case, I'm going to call this one structural versus MEP, or since I have no electrical in this one, I'm just going to call it structural versus MP. Now I have the choice between wireframe or transparency, whichever my preference happens to be. I prefer transparency, so I'm going to leave it that way. But let's say if I open up my different documents, I can get very specific if I want to, or I can say just do the entire category. In this case, I'm going to just look at my piping and my ductwork on one side versus my structural columns and framework on the other. I'm going to leave my tolerance where it is. I'm going to go ahead and say run test. So right now, what it showed there, sorry I hit OK, but in about a third of a second, it showed about 104 different clashes. If I highlight this button, if I hit the highlight button, I can see where all those individual clashes are. If I click on any of the individual clashes, I'll be able to see where that's located, move to a new angle, shift this around so that's in a proper position for me to look at. And if I go back and forth between those, it will remember that camera angle. Now, in most cases, what you're going to, a lot of times what you're going to find is that you don't necessarily have purview over the MEP or say if you've subcontracted plumbing or you subcontracted heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So what you'll want to do on that case is you're actually going to want to run out a report. So I can run out a PDF report or HTML report. In this case, I've got one already saved up in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open that one up instead. And what that will do is it'll give you a full report based on where the clashes are. It'll show you a thumbnail of those clashes along with a 2D location as to where those are. Your element IDs, your exact clash points, which files they came from, everything you would need to actually locate that. And you can distribute these to your subs to say, this is what's going on, this is where these are connecting, can you guys do something about this? Now, if you've got that being taken care of in-house, that's actually that can actually be a lot more useful in terms of just being able to use Fuzor to find those and resolve them. So let's say, for instance, this is kind of the reason I live linked back in there. So let's say if I'm looking at, say, clash number 20. Well, I can see that I've got my highlights on. You know, if I isolate it, I can see where that is. I've got a complete run going over here. So let's say if I have purview over that movement. You know, let's say if I've got this set up over here, what I can do is I can say refit, and I'm just going to do this manually right now rather than giving an exact number. But let's say if I shift that over, what I'm going to notice is in my clash detection here, it's going to show me green. Now, one of the things we can also do in the VDC is we have our interactive 2D map. The interactive 2D map also works interactively with our clash if you want to be able to see where your clash is located. Now that I've moved that one, just like before, the pipe is disconnected. So in my clash, I'm showing that one resolved, but obviously there's others to go with it. Now let's say if I'm tied into my my revit model. If I go ahead and select that and say sync selected, just like before, what it's going to do is it's going to move that. It's going to say I need to reconnect all these other runs. And since this is an interactive clash report, what you'll see is it's actually resolved additional clashes inside of the Fuzor side. So you'll be able to see how that actually actively affects that. Originally we had 104 different clashes. Now it's actually showing 105. So if you do create more clashes, it'll actually tack those on to the end. So since we started clash 0, this is going to be clash 104 as the 105th clash. And since I moved that entire pipeline over, it's actually showing that this particular pipe is now running into that. So I could always grab that, and again, I can quickly resolve that one, get that out of the way, and then sync that back again. And there we go. And so what that'll do is that'll keep an active tracking of your clash resolution, how many different clashes are resolved, which ones have been resolved. If I hit my clash name really quickly to sort that, or if I hit the stage, what I can look at is that'll auto-sort by any of those tabs. So now I've got still 90 that I haven't looked at, 5 that I have, 10 that have already been resolved. And I can look through those just really quickly, kind of be able to see what I prioritize. I can add tags to each of those. And I can save that into my Fuzor document so that if somebody sends me revisions and then I go and reopen this, what it'll do is it'll recheck and find out that whether or not those changes that they gave to us actually resolved those issues. And so that's kind of an idea of partly what Fuzor can do in terms of interactive clash detection for VDC. So one of the other topics that I briefly kind of jumped on there was we're trying to show the 2D, 3D interactivity. So for instance, what we have right here on the side for our show 2D map, this is actually interactively based on what we have brought into Fuzor. So we bring over the geometry accurately. We have an auto measure system on there, but if I decide I want to go over here and say toggle different things off, say the auto measure, if I want to look at specifically, the ceiling plan versus the floor plan, if I want to move using the 2D map, if I want to be able to select something with the 2D map, say, for instance, I select this particular table, if I want to go over here and refit, I can move that, up, down, here in this direction. I can move that using the 2D map as well. And so that gives you, that ability to communicate with, folks who maybe in the field, like where I came from CM, or, the guys that are used to looking top-down at 2D drawing, and they'll be able to kind of see that correlation between what the space should look like versus what is actually what is actually shown on your plans. Now that map is actually interactive, so if I decide I want to go over here and drop my avatar down, let's say if I'm walking over here, let's take a quick jog up here. And if I start walking up the stairs, what you'll notice about the 2D plan is right now it's set to auto. Oops. Assuming I don't walk myself into a wall. There we go. Oops, this way. So what that's actually doing is it's updating with my avatar movement. So now you'll actually notice that I'm on the second floor. You'll be able to see that update happening in there. If I decide I want to move myself around on the 2D map, with my mouse, I can do that as well. It'll keep updating with them. Now let's say if I want to look at this and I need a specific elevation view, I can also create my own elevation views inside of Fuzor, if you want to show that at, say, a coordination meeting or otherwise. So let's say, for instance here, let's go custom elevation 1. I can go ahead and create an elevation view inside that 2D map. And let's say if I just want to look at this particular side panel over here, I'm going to go ahead and clip that really quickly. Now I can kind of see where my staircase is coming up, where that side panel is looking at. If I want to be able to create a custom ceiling or floor plan from that, what I can also do is say, custom floor plan 1, and I can say create floor view. And so now I have a floor view that has my planetarium dome that's in there. Let's say if I go up here to finished floor, second floor, I believe it is. There we go. So now I have my map that's available inside of here. I'm going to go ahead and click on this one, move my doors open. And so I can quickly walk around, move in there. There we go. Now, really quickly, what I'm going to do is, since I've made a couple of changes to this one here, I'm just going to make sure, I'm just going to kind of disconnect this one again to kind of show you that we can actually work this without having to be connected there. I'm going to shut Revit completely down, and I'm going to open up something here really quickly in terms of doing a couple other aspects of the VDC part that are kind of useful for, again, the design, the review, and the constructability side of the project. And then what I can do is, at that point, there's a lot the Fuzor can do, but I'm going to see if if I can open it up in terms of if there's any last questions or otherwise. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show one specific thing that's very important, and that no good design tool should be without, and that's the ability to make annotations. So let's say if I'm over here, let's go ahead and just jump myself to a specific location. I've got my project over here. And I know that there's one thing specifically that I want to look at. So let's go to free camera control really quickly here. What I can do is, let's say if I'm looking at this one here, I'm looking at an L bracket where it's actually branching off from that pipe. And we're noticing it's really not looking at anything. It's not capped. It's not connected. I can click on that and I can say create an annotation. Now with the annotations, what I can do is I can say, request for information, category, design error, change it to RFI pipe. And, so I can ask the question, where is this going? If I want to add a markup in there, I can click the add button. I'll be able to draw on my screen, save that out as an attachment. If I want to, say, look down here, I can add another markup here that says, maybe I want a piece of equipment in this area here. And then I can click the little plus sign down here. I can add different attachments to that if I want to, say, add a specification manual for the specific equipment I'm talking about. Once I'm done, I can save that out. That's now currently highlighted in red. I can turn that off if I want to, but that's now saved into my annotation manager. That can be saved out. It can be looked at in here, opened up in another Fuzor file. So if I click on it, it'll jump right to it. I'll be able to see the different attachments in there. What I can also do is, since I did close down Revit, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open that back up. Let's say if I go ahead and save out that specific file. So in this case, I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to go ahead and save that in this folder here. Let's call that annotation 1. What I can do is, I don't have to necessarily load that into Fuzor. What I can do is I can load that into my my Revit file as well through the Fuzor ribbon. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say load annotations. Oops, not that one. Oh, that's also another version, but let's load the one I actually saved. So what that's done is actually loaded that annotation into Revit. Now let's say if I hit highlight annotations, now wherever that annotation is, it'll show up in red. If I double click on that annotation, what it'll do is it'll try to take me directly to the most applicable 2D view. Now maybe there is one, sometimes there isn't, but a lot of times what that'll do is it'll let you move that in there. I know, for instance, there actually is a good 2D view on, let's say, this right here. Oops, let's go cancel out of this one. And let's say if I hit this one, yeah. I'm trying to remember which one. Finished floor, first floor. Oh, sorry, reflected ceiling plan. There we go. So let's say if I double click on that one, I should be able to note that in there. If I hit highlight annotation, it's actually showing me where that is. Currently I'm in coarse mode. If I bring that up to something where it's a little more visible, say fine mode, I'll be able to see that pipe in that particular location. Let's go ahead and say hide annotations. And so now I can actually see where that pipe is located, what I might need to do with it. And it'll give me an idea of, it'll give me the ability to quickly access that particular portion of my file. Now just one of the last things I kind of want to go over in terms of just the VDC side of the application of Fuzor is, what happens when you want to, say present this to a client or bring this to a meeting. Let's say you don't have access to Fuzor there, or let's say you just want to be able to send this out for distribution. What you have the ability to do with Fuzor is you can also save it out to what's called our viewers. So the viewers are what it does is it creates a standalone executable that you can put out for download. People can download it. They can double click on it, and even if their computer doesn't have Fuzor, as long as it's capable of running something graphics-wise, they'll be able to move around like you do, fly around, walk around, and create annotations. And what that'll do is it'll just take away the ability to do any kind of direct editing. The only thing they'll be able to do is make notations. Now with VDC, what that also means is that we punch out the executable viewer, and we also give them the ability to scrub through the timeline. So let's say if you have the viewer saved out where you have a certain box section box set up, they'll only see that portion. If you have the timeline where, let's say if you shrank it down to only February 2nd through March 15th, then they'll only be able to see that timeline. And so you can quickly punch out a 4D schedule or a 4D simulation that somebody can look at. The viewers are 100% VR ready as well, so if the client happens to have a VR headset like the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, they'll also be able to jump in and view it inside of the VR environment. We also have the ability to put it out to our mobile viewer. The mobile viewer also has the ability, if you put it out with the VDC, that the mobile viewer can also view the 4D timeline. You'll be able to scrub through that. And so that makes it also a little bit easier to handle, a little bit easier to distribute, if not as graphics intensive as, say, the full version that you'll load onto your desktop. It also means that if you need to bring this to a presentation, you can just bring the executable file, open that up, and have people walk around through it without having to, say, float a network license to another computer, or something to that effect. And then just one more thing I kind of want to talk about really quickly for the VDC side, promise is the last one more thing, is the network collaboration. What we currently have the ability to do is we can actually set up a file so that if you have a host-capable version of Fuzor, which includes Ultimate or VDC, you can set up what's called a real-time VR collaboration session. What that lets people do is if they happen to have another license of Fuzor, or if you happen to have the collaboration viewer licenses set up, what you can do is either send out a viewer or connect with somebody else who happens to have a license of Fuzor, and they'll be able to log in. You'll have several people inside the same session at once, where they can either be tethered to you so you can give them a guided tour, or you can release them to what's called free roaming. And free roaming lets them wander the project freely. You'll be able to kind of gather up group annotations where if anybody makes an annotation, it'll be centralized. You can save that out and keep that. And that'll give you multiple sets of eyes on the project simultaneously. And so that's kind of one of the other added benefits that that we do, that it gives that interactivity that you won't find anywhere else. Now, there's a lot more that Fuzor can do in terms of just being able to do design, beautification, analysis. We have several other tools in here, including your several different measurement tools, light metering reporting, view analysis, safety and height clearance. But for now, that's kind of these are kind of the topics I wanted to cover in terms of reference for VDC.